Good evening and welcome to Story Hour. I'm tonight's host, Laura Blackwell. My co-host, Daniel Marcus, started Story Hour at the beginning of a local shelter-in-place order, the one before this one, to help people remain connected while we're apart. And that's what it's been like. It's been a little gathering around the campfire every week for the past several months. And here we are, still sheltering in stories together. So, welcome back to those of you returning, and welcome to those of you joining us for the first time. As always, we have two writers reading for their favorite nonprofits. Tonight's readers are Gregory Norman Bossert and SB Divya. If you are fortunate enough to help during this time, please consider a donation to one or both of our two featured nonprofits, Fair Fight and Doctors Without Borders. Gregory Norman Bossert is reading for Fair Fight. Voting is the bedrock on which our community's future and your ambitions are built. From illegal voter purges to hundreds of poll closures to 4-hour lines, Georgia voters have faced a sophisticated yet hauntingly familiar attack on their rights to vote. Hundreds of thousands of voters were affected by poor election management and systematic voter suppression, crippling Georgia's democracy. Fair Fight is fighting back. You can learn more at fairfight.com. SB Divya is reading for Doctors Without Borders. I'm going to try to say the French Médecins Sans Frontières, something like that. That's important because that's actually what they use for their initials. So Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, MSF, is a private international association founded in 1971. The association is made up mainly of doctors and health sector workers and is also open to other professions which might help in achieving its aims. MSF's mission is to provide life-saving medical care to those most in need. You can learn more at doctorswithoutborders.org. If you're here on Zoom, please feel free to leave your camera on. It can be very nice for our readers to see their distant audience. Chime in on the text if you like. On Zoom, if you're on Facebook, we're not seeing your messages in real time. Sorry. Our first reader tonight is Gregory Norman Bossert. Gregory Norman Bossert is an author and filmmaker based just over the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco. He started writing in 2009 on a dare and has no intention of stopping anytime soon. His story, The Telling, won a 2013 World Fantasy Award. Other stories have appeared everywhere from Asimov's science fiction to the Saturday Evening Post, with recent stories in conjunctions, Black Static, Weird Fiction Review, and Tor.com. When not writing, he wrangles spaceships and superheroes for a little company you may have heard of, Lucasfilms Industrial Lights and Magic? Sounds familiar. More information is available at gregorynormanbossert.com. Gregory Norman Bossert, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm a huge fan of the show. I really struggled to figure out what to read tonight, since I tend to be a long-winded writer, and all of my fun, frivolous fantasy stories would take hours to read, and all my short stories are kind of dark and dismal. There is a English tradition of ghost stories for Christmas, though, and I have a ghost story. It's about haunted Dryerland, but it would also sadly take about an hour to read. But you know, there's people and places that go unnoticed, or ghosts in different sorts of ways. And the writing cafe that I was discussing with some of you before the show started is a place where some of the homeless people in my town of San Rafael in Marin County can come in and get out of the sun or the rain and get a cup of coffee or a glass of water, Wi-Fi and electricity and companionship. And for a couple of years, I talked to an older gentleman who sometimes was housed and sometimes was not, and who was amazingly knowledgeable in everything from Paris cafes to the history of Istanbul. And one day he didn't show up and I never saw him again. So that was part of the impetus for this story. There's also places that kind of go unnoticed. On the walk back to my house from the same cafe, I passed through several little kind of niches on the side of the road. And if you peek through, there's a river that runs right through my neighborhood, completely hidden from day-to-day notice. And that was the other kind of starting point for this story. I wrote it in a weekend. and had no idea what to do with it. It didn't really fit in any standard genre. It was the first story I'd written that was kind of set in our world and not some fantasy or science fictional setting. So I sent it to the least likely markets I could think of and went on vacation. And so I was actually at the Foynes bookstore, also in the cafe, I love cafes, in London with a good friend when I found out that it sold to the Saturday Evening Post. So here it is. It's called God Ray. Childers found the creek first in late March after the short, rainless California winter. He'd scored a pint of something off the counter of the All Night on 4th when the owner's back was turned, and he needed somewhere out of sight to drink down the evidence. The creek cut via gullies and culverts between houses of the residential west end of town. Narrow, deep, lined with scrubby bush willows and feral bamboo, it served as a highway for deer, coyote, and others from the sunburnt hills to the sprinkler-fed greens and trash can paradise of suburbia. The shade in the rock-strewn bottom was cool and green, invisible from the busy street at head height above. The pint bottle proved to be gin, a clean, bitter blast mixed with the creek smell of moss and wild sage. And the cops drove past twice without slowing down. That afternoon, Childers dragged his duffel and the suitcase with one wheel from the alley behind the Vinnie's soup kitchen and set up camp. By mid-June, Childers' bloodstream was a battleground between tick-borne babesiosis, anaplasmosis, rabbit fever. The early symptoms, swelling, confusion, headaches, paranoia, the shakes, weren't that different from his accustomed state. He treated himself with his usual regimen of cheap booze, an even coating of salt over whatever the Vinnies were serving that day, and aspirin when he could lift a bottle from Walgreens. By the 4th of July, his vision was shot, and his sense of time and space submerged in the rising churn of disease. The mile into town was a voyage on markless waters. The current of his confusion dragged him north onto the exposed ridge over town, or east onto the shoulder of the highway where tires screeched and coughed dust at him. But he could always find his way back to the creek. Like a green light on my face, like the sun, but green and dark water I can smell, you know what I mean? Smell it like a wolf or some shit, like it's singing me back, he said to Dan, even though Dan was in Modesto and dead. That creek sense was steady, but sly. It sent him down different ways every time, or if they were the same ways, they seemed different. What was a weed-choked alley became a leafy boulevard. What was a corner became a cliff that had to be navigated hand by hand. And that's how Childers found the camera, fumbling through a stack of boxes for a handhold to pull himself over a suddenly precipitous curb. It was a digital point and shoot with a built-in flash and a tiny LCD display on back, the sort you'd buy for a child who'd take pictures for an afternoon and then lose it on her way to school the next morning. Childers ran his thumb over the smooth silver plastic, the nubby black buttons, just for the pleasure of the touch, accidentally took a photo of his foot. Pawn it and buy a full quart of that cactus schnapps on discount at the All Night was Childers' first thought. He turned back towards B Street and Schulte's, but Schulte's, with its case of stilled watches and its hanging forest of guitars, wasn't there, closed or moved, or maybe it was on some other B Street in some other town. Childers sat in the shade of a Starbucks umbrella at the corner of 4th, prodded the camera with a shattered nail. The LCD went green. Childers squinted against the delirious light, saw it was the photo of his foot, with all the half-seen details of the creek since laid clear. The granite precipice of the curb, the grassy hummus of the sidewalk, the lichen-splattered stone of his own boot. A strange thrill rang in his ears, shook his limbs such that he almost dropped the camera. He steadied it on his knee, fumbled at the buttons until he found the shutter. Each photo, each screen was a tiny window into the world under creek light. The photos revealed the open doors of Starbucks as a vine-curtained cave, the customers as trees, between their roots, the trickle of the creek itself. That man is taking pictures of me, the girl at the next table said. Her mother half turned to glare at Childers, one hand out to shield the girl's knees that were bent birch through the camera. A barista, within whose wide-paunched torso Childers could have curled, wiped his hands on his apron, leaned in close. Get lost, pervert, before I beat the crap out of you, he said. It wasn't her, she's a tree. It's the water running through like some miracle shit right through her legs. But Childers' breath lagged behind his vision and only the last few words made it out. The barista swore and grabbed for the camera. Childa's got an elbow in the way, staggered up, knocking the table back. One leg slipping off the curb to send the umbrella toppling onto the street, where it lay like an arrow on a crumpled map. Childa stumbled along that line, one hand on the hot hood of the car that stopped screeching in the far lane. The barista shouted something about cops. Childa's vision had gone a gritty gray. He navigated by camera and photo. In the creek light, it showed, picture at a time. It was long hours before he caught the scent of the creek again. Childa stuck to the camp for the next couple of days, drinking the rivulet of lawn runoff and scavenging the dregs of abandoned bottles. Ain't hungry, Dan. It's the creek. It's making me stronger, see? He explained to the coyote that slumped in quiet decay at the mouth of the culvert under the road. Filthy son of a bitch bastard, by which Childa meant not Dan, but the Starbucks barista who had grown to a shambling, bare-shagged giant in his recollection. The coyote's opalescent eyes took no offense. The camera showed the creek as it was, no more or less, but the photos of the road above, taken through the low arch of tree limb, revealed a field of rough grasses and flowered shrubs through which cars grumbled like cattle. The long golden legs of the joggers who passed morning and afternoon shone and shifted on that field like the sun through clouds. God rays, Childa thought, and conceived a desire to photograph himself in that light. He found a perch on the culvert and an angle with a camera at arm's length that placed him at the feet of the oblivious passers-by. He shed his clothes, keeping only his boots for their grip on the concrete culvert, an urge not carnal, the meat had long since spoiled, but vital, a notion of the warmth and nourishment of light on skin. The jogger's arrival was heralded by a chatter like birds before a storm, a static stirring of the hair on his neck and shoulders. Childa fumbled for the shutter with his thumb, pressed it once, but the camera had twisted into his palm, worked it straight in suddenly shaking fingers, and hit the shutter again. A moment's warmth against his back, a whirlwind of laughter, and then they had passed. The first photo was black. The second showed a curtain of light hanging over the meadow of the road, a light so alive and essential it shimmered and shifted on the camera screen. In the foreground, a bank of stone and root rolled down into the creek. But of Childa himself there in the photo, there was no sign. The rest of that day was lost to blackness, as if Childa himself had twisted in hand, was pointed at nothing. The empty bottles were now truly empty, and he waited for the need for alcohol to drive him up and out of town. But even that urge had gone missing, was no more evident in himself than he was in that photo. Childa dreamed that night, though, for the first time in memory, and those dreams were black and silent. There was a warmth like light, and when he woke, he found a fawn curled against him. It was a tiny thing, not much bigger than his chest, on which it nestled. Childa reached a trembling hand to trace the thin ridge of his neck, the lines of its ribs. It was only after it opened its eyes and licked his fingers that he began to accept that it might be real, not some creek-made manifestation of himself. To be certain, he took a photo of it as it wobbled over to drink from the creek. On the screen, the fawn was crisp and clear, and its eyes marked by the same light with which the creek was lined. The fawn limped around the camp. Its left rear leg was short and loosely hinged. It paused to sniff cautiously at the matted clump of fur in the culvert. "That's just Dan," Childa said. He don't mean nothing by it." Satisfied, the fawn staggered back to curl up in his arms. "She's hungry," Dan said. "The creek will take care of that," Childa said. The fawn looked up at him. Childa pulled a tick from between his eyes, flicked it away. "Look at me, I don't need the food no more, not even the booze." She's a child of the dry," Dan said. The camera came on by itself, the shaded stone that was Starbucks on the screen. Somewhere in those depths were pitchers full of milk. "What can I do about it? Damn filthy bear!" The fawn flinched at his tone. Dan just stared, head cocked at the angle the skull had settled. Childa couldn't meet that gaze, thumbed the camera instead. "I ain't even really here no more," he said to the fawn. "See?" He scrolled back to the image of the joggers whose light had passed him by. But now, in the dim at the bottom of the creek, he saw details in the foreground he had missed before. The mossy line of a beard, the mica glint of an eye, his shoulders of that root that can split stone. "I am there. Verdamned. I'm a verdamned man," Childa said. It means green, he told the fawn. Childus left the fawn under Dan's watchful eye and made his way, one photo at a time, down 4th to Starbucks. There were moments of fear along the path, but the cop at the corner of D Street proved to be a low scrub oak. The stream that was B Street was shallow and easy to wade. The bear was slumped and somnolent within the cave that was the cafe. The thicket of tree people and shrub people and stone people that at first seemed a barrier proved to be welcome cover, shadowed in the creek light as they were and stilled in the camera's sight. He filled 1 cup with whole milk and 2 with half and half, tucked them into the ragged pockets of his jacket, and wedged them upright with packets of sugar. As he wove his way out again, the bear lifted its ragged head and looked about, nostrils flared. But without the camera, without creek sense, it cannot see Childus through the thicket. They're damned, Childus told it. The fawn drank a bit of the half and half laced with sugar, splashed in the creek with renewed vigor, came back and drank the milk, tipping the cup over and licking it from the grass. Childus poured a bit of the 2nd cup of half and half out for Dan, drank a little for himself. It sat heavy and strange in his belly, but the weight was not unwelcome. After his descent and return from Starbucks, Childus felt light, untethered, like he might drift up under the leaves with the suspended dust and the gnats beyond the leaves even, to where the clouds sprawled orange and pink. Better to sink right down here into the creek, ain't it, Dan? He said. Dan reserved comment. The fawn licked his fingers. Sometime after midnight, Dan woke Childus with a touch of tongue to his forehead, a rumbled growl. The fawn was awake as well, eyes wide and luminous, like the moon on water, but there was no moon, no light at all, not even the street lamps on the road above. And the creek muttered to itself and spat drops against his leg. There was a cracking and a low chesty shudder to the west. Childus's first thought was earthquake, but the sound was followed by a sharp gust and the smell of wet earth, a progression so rare in California that Childus's understanding of it came from some other life entirely. Storm coming, he told the fawn, who shook and shivered against itself closer against him. The crack came again, and a flash of light, and another crack and a low rumbling that did not fade, but grew louder and lower. Lightning again, the fawn huffed and flicked its ears against Childus's cheek. Just a flash, he told it, like the camera, creek light. He took a photo, showed it to the fawn. The creek was a green tunnel, around which a darkness as clear and as deep as the fawn's eye. Dan was trying to tell him something, but the rumbling drowned him out. The fawn struggled to its feet. Childus hugged it to his chest, got the camera strap around his wrist. He took another photo, but this one was all dark, and then the flood hit. There was no transition. He was on the ground, and then he was under the water. The lightning was everywhere, his vision more clear in that moment than it had been since he found the creek. He held the fawn in one arm, reached down with the other, grabbed Dan as they were swept into the culvert. Dan's body had long since gone down into the creek, but his pelt streamed behind his skull like he'd been reborn in this new world of water. They spilled from the far end of the culvert, tumbling so that the lightning was one moment to their side and the next beneath their feet. Childus thought that, verdammed as he was, he might be able to breathe the water, but before he could try it, the creek overflowed his channel. The turning edges spread wide, and the center where he floated, for a moment, grew calm and swift. But as fast as they were flowing, the storm was faster. It caught up with him, such wind and water in its wake that the surface was not much different than the tumbling depths. The fawn slipped from under his arm, spun round as its leg turned uselessly beneath it. Its head went under. Childus kicked once, twice, got a hand under its quivering belly. The fawn snorted, shook the water from its face, looked wide-eyed down at him through the surface as he went under in turn. Childus pushed himself up, pulled the fawn close. Ain't your fault, he said in his ear. You was born to the dry. He kicked again, caught at a hedge that had once marked a lawn and now only served to spread the water wider. Dan's pelt swirled away, but Childus had his thumb through the hole of Dan's eye, the white of the skull and the plastic gleam of the camera on the end of its leash, the only thing visible in the flash. They were in the churn again at the edge of the flood. Childus spun round and spun again, hit something with his feet. It was a car half submerged. Next to it, a minivan whose roof ran entirely above the flow. Children shuffled sideways on the windshield of the car, boosted the fawn up onto the van. It scrabbled over the branches that had washed up against the cars, stood clear among oak leaves at the top. Children tossed Dan up to clatter amongst the branches. The fawn nosed the skull upright, shook its own ears out. The two of them looked down at Childers. Like a green light on my face, he told them, like it's singing me back. And then the creek pulled him under for a long while. When he came to again, Childers had lost the camera, but he didn't need the camera to see that the lightning, which struck in long, perfect lines, golden all along the ridge above, was the legs of the storm. God rays, he thought. If he had had the camera, he would have taken a picture of himself with her as she passed, but then she stopped, the storm did, and leaned down and saw him and lifted him from the water. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. That was really beautiful. Harrowing, but beautiful. We always seem to need a breath between the stories to let one absorb and give ourselves a moment to clear our minds to be ready for the next one.
Makes me want to pick up the Saturday Evening Post and see what else they're publishing these days.
Right? Right? I mean, I wasn't aware of anything they published since Norman Rockwell, but obviously they're doing some good stuff.
I didn't know they were still in business, but yes, and they were a delight to work with. So I encourage people to submit there and to read it.
And apparently to go on vacation and sit in a coffee shop waiting to hear back. I mean, it sounds like a good deal to me.
Seriously.
Well, our next writer tonight is S.V. Divya. S.V. Divya is a lover of science, math, fiction, and the Oxford comma. She is the Hugo and Nebula nominated author of Runtime and co-editor of Escape Pod with Mur Lafferty. Her short stories have been published at various magazines, and her debut novel, Machine Hood, is forthcoming from Saga Press in March 2021. She holds degrees in computational neuroscience and signal processing. Find her on Twitter at Divya's Tweets or at fwords, that's EFF-words.com. Divya, welcome. Thank you so much for coming back tonight.
Thank you, Laura. It's my pleasure to be here. Tonight, I am reading a story that was born from its title. The title came first. It was given as a prompt. And the story was initially a little flash piece that I expanded over time. Eventually, it sold to Analog Magazine, where it was published a couple of years ago. And it's really kind of a mashup of my love of looking at far future posthumanism, and in this case, something very personal, which is the older relatives, especially my grandmother, and their struggles with technology. So without further ado, soft we wake. My mother's voice, soft and insistent, rouses me. Wake up, Hikaru. I open my eyes to someone who is not my mother. This thing calls herself a person, and she is human-shaped, but my mind rejects the glittering skin and glassy eyes. She stands next to my bed, a simple cot framed by dark wood, set in one corner of my temporary room. A window lets in the morning light. If I stretch my arms wide, I can almost touch the walls. Your breakfast is ready. She steals a voice from my past in a misguided attempt to bring comfort. Will you eat here or in the garden? The aroma of steaming rice, tamagoyaki, and broiled salmon rise from the tray that it carries. My mouth waters. The garden, I say, and sit upright. Metallic lips curve into a smile. You're feeling adventurous today. That shows progress. Artificial sunlight flickers through real trees that dapple shade upon the real grass. I sit alone at a wooden table. 4 others remain, also sitting by themselves. Of our original 75, 3 were unrevivable. A dozen moved out almost immediately, embracing the enhancements offered by these future humans. Others took longer. Some made the transition hand in hand with a loved one. Those pained me the most. As I eat, I think of the birdsong that accompanied my childhood breakfast in Kyoto. The silence here is discomfiting. When I'm finished, my not mother returns to remove the dishes. Would you like to begin your departure treatments today? No. Very well, a tour perhaps. Numbers 12 and 62 have expressed interest. You could join them. No. The counselor advises, I know, I don't care, leave me be. My rudeness disturbs me. I can imagine my real mother chiding me for interrupting. My not mother maintains her composure as always. She bows her unnatural ovoid head and departs on silent feet, politely leaving unspoken that my time here draws to a close. In this future life, you can't remain old or sick or unproductive for long. I move to a stone bench that encircles a pool of water. My fingers break the surface tension and create ripples. Fine wrinkles trace the back of my pale skin. I passed my prime before going into storage. Silver chased my black hair and grooves decorated the corners of my eyes and mouth. Our caretakers have offered us youth. I could live a second life, but what good is that without kinship? Wake up, Hika-chan. My father's voice is gentle but firm. My not father has 4 arms and 4 legs. Our caretakers change weekly. I roll over and close my eyes, but my traitorous stomach rumbles and insists that I eat. It has always been my nemesis. After breakfast, I walk by myself through hallways tiled in earthen hues, tan, gray, ochre, brick. I find myself at the door to the cryo chamber and push it open. The rows of capsules are all empty, dusty gunmetal coffins, and I aim for mine, number 53. The cover opens with an echoing click. I climb in and lie down. The ceiling above curves in spotless white perfection. Do you wish you were still asleep? I bolt upright, my cheeks burn. A woman with a gaunt frame stands in the doorway. The number 8 is woven into her shirt and partly covered by her gray blonde braid. We weren't asleep, we were frozen. She shrugs. No real difference. Why haven't you left? I look away. I don't like the way they live now, so inhuman. I can't stop the shudder that passes through me. They can take away those feelings. Yes, they can change us in many ways, but then what's left? Who would I be? She shrugs again. My name is Annika. Hikaru, nice to meet you, I say out of habit. Sometimes I think it would be easier if they forced me out. They won't. Living must be a choice, etc. She sighs. I wish I were dead. When I look at the door again, she's gone. Her Scandinavian features spark memories of my adolescence, lake effect snow in our Rochester yard, and Sunday beer runs across state lines, the pinch of a mosquito bite, the crisp, soft contradiction of fried cheese curds. When I arrived in the United States, these things were as foreign to me as I to them. But youth is elastic. It adapts in ways that an elderly mind cannot. In the afternoons, I attend the mandatory counseling sessions. My therapist appears in human form, a plump and disarmingly middle-aged female of indeterminate ethnicity, but without any substance. Her figure is made of light. a projection inhabited and controlled by a remote entity whom I've never met. She has no name. "I'm your doctor," she said at our first meeting. During a later session, she explained that some people don't use sound or letters for their names. It's no longer polite to rely on audio speech identifiers. I sit on a sofa decorated in tasteful earth tones with splashes of color in the form of embroidered flowers. "The best way to overcome your anxiety is to take small steps of exposure," the doctor says. "I've watched the recordings." "That's good. Next is to go outside the facility, experience the world from the safety of a vehicle. We can ease the discomfort if you give us permission." I squeeze my hands around a throw cushion. "How can I when I hardly understand what you're planning to do? I hate making these kinds of decisions. I never had to before. Kian was the certain one, not me, and he isn't here. Can't you decide what's best and do it? Or put me back in the freezer. I don't care." The doctor's image crinkles its face until it exudes sympathy. "Change can be difficult to accept, especially for people from an era like yours. Why not give our world a try, Hikaru? Take the modifications. Become a productive citizen, integrate with modern society. If you don't like it, you can elect to go back into storage after 6 months. Isn't it better to take that initiative than go by default?" "No, dear doctor, not for me. Far easier to freeze like the proverbial deer in headlights and let the inevitable take its course." "Wake up, babe," says my lover, full of promise and temptation. "No, not that voice." I glare at the hovering crystal orb. My stomach churns with anger and bile. "I apologize," it says, switching to my grandmother's voice. "I missed the note in your file." Kian was supposed to be number 54, waking up by my side to a brighter future together. He convinced me to go first after my heart attack. My technophile lover, convinced that in the future, humanity would be able to cure many medical problems. In that, he proved right. "They'll probably print you a new heart," he'd said. "I can't wait to see what else they can do." His final kiss scraped my upper lip with stubble, assailed my nose with coffee breath. His brown eyes crinkled with the same irrepressible enthusiasm that drew me to him. "You should be here. You promised I wouldn't have to do this alone." They let me search their archives, but even ones and zeros are lost with enough time. If Kian left me a message, a reason why a stranger climbed out of the capsule next to mine, I couldn't find it. I wish he'd carved it in stone. My not grandmother escorts me to the garden where I see Annika alone. I approach her table. "May I join you?" She pulls back slightly, but she says, "Yes." I raise miso soup to my lips and let the salty liquid burn my tongue and warm my belly. They will make us any food we want. I dined at a Michelin-starred restaurant with Kian for our 25th anniversary, but my cravings here are for childhood simplicity. Annika slices sausage into delicate circles and lifts them to her mouth. "Where did you live before?" I asked. "Here. I mean, what used to be here." The cryogenic facility had been in Stockholm, far from the fog-enshrouded bays of San Francisco, where my lover and I grew old together. I don't know what they call this place today, and I don't want to. We should have been restored to life long ago, but we were neglected. Not forgotten, but low priority. They said a humanitarian spent years of productivity credit to bring us back. The label seemed ironic. "Your English is very good," I say to Annika. "So is yours," she says. I incline my head. "Point taken. I moved to the United States when I was 11. Canada for me, for work. I was a professor of chemistry. The other day, You didn't say why you're still here. A shadow darkens her expression such that I regret asking. An apology is on the tip of my tongue, but she speaks first. My daughter put me in the chamber. I knew nothing about it. Dementia. I worked to keep the surprise from showing on my face. The counselor said they wouldn't heal my heart without my permission. They also refused to give me the medication I'd been taking before, at home. The pharmaceuticals of your time were barbaric, the doctor had explained, a blunt instrument for a delicate problem. We have much better treatment options, but you will have to integrate yourself first. No, thank you, doctor. I've never been fond of machines. I used them when I had to sell my artwork, and I want no part of me to become artificial. But how had Annika's mind been restored? My expression betrays me, or perhaps she's heard the question from others because she answers it anyway. They fixed my brain enough for me to function again. There are parts of my life I can't remember, lost forever. I'm sorry. She shrugs. Ironic, isn't it? Our caregivers are so concerned with choice and consent, and yet here I am because I had neither. I don't know how to respond to the bitterness that permeates her words, so I scoop a forkful of fried egg into my mouth. 2 more people have left the facility, Annika says. Oh, I'm grateful for the change in subject, but I wonder if I'll be the last to go. I redirect the conversation a different way. Whose voice did you get today? My favorite uncle, my father's younger brother. He was only 10 years older than me, and he understood me like no one else. Her eyes brim with unshed tears, and she pushes her chair away from the table. I lost my mind before any of them died, but now they're all dust, and here I am. I miss them too, I say. My words come soft, and Annika is walking away. If she heard them, she gives no sign. Our grace period at this transitory home dwindles to 4 days. 3 of us remain, stubborn or fearful, or I don't know what keeps 26. He never speaks. I dine alone in the garden this morning. The orb that is not my grandmother gathers my dishes and asks, "Would you like to begin your departure treatments today?" No, but I will take a tour. The orb pulses with a warm orange glow. I will make the arrangements. A compact vehicle with 3 wheels and a comfortably cushioned seat takes me from the facility's courtyard. It speaks to me with an unknown voice, melodious and fluting. My heart stutters at the view as we emerge into the outside world. Great towers of entwined glass and greenery soar in the distance. The road ahead is more like a wide clearing than the streets I remember. Plants line both sides and grow into structures that sprout from the ground. Are these buildings? I ask. They are private dwellings, my vehicle replies. The structures you see farther away are data clusters and production facilities. A handful of non-human shapes move along the avenue. After seeing the variety of my caregivers, their eclectic forms don't startle me. Why aren't those people using vehicles like you? I'm a special purpose volunteer. They can reconfigure me if they need to travel faster. I sense a note of amusement underlying the words. My transport moves at a comfortable pace, slow enough that the lack of windows isn't bothersome. They're all networked together, right? That's why they aren't talking? Correct, but network communications are considered a form of speech. Birdsong and the rustling of leaves relieve the silence. A blue sky forms a bowl above. Clouds drift across in elongated shapes. The familiar clashes with the strange, and I grip the seat against a sense of vertigo. It's rather beautiful, I whisper. I can't help it. My artist's eye traces the organic shapes of the landscape and the people. Do they have paint in this time? Canvases? Paper? A figure appears at an intersection, At first glance, it looks like a human being, and I almost call out a greeting. Then it turns. The eyes are solid silver. It blinks and nods a silent greeting at me, but I am too busy swallowing a gasp to respond. When I regain my composure, I say, "Take me back, please." I come out of sleep feeling disoriented. My room is dark. A hand shakes my shoulder and I turn on the ceiling light. Annika sits on the floor next to my cot. Her gaunt frame shivers in the chill air, and dried tears mark her cheeks. I can't sleep. I keep wondering if I'm being a coward, if I'm being ungrateful. What sacrifices did my family make to give me this chance? And I'm going to throw it all away. Not that they're here to care about it. I gather my thoughts. I took the tour. I know. Here, lie down, I say, and scoot against the wall to make room. Her blue eyes widen. I don't mean it like that, but you're cold and I don't mind the company. Please? Annika lies next to me, careful to avoid touch, but her body's warmth crosses the gap. I turn out the light. Honesty comes easier in the dark. "Will you take the treatment tomorrow?" she asks. What I saw outside, I'm still scared, but it wasn't all bad. The world they've built is strange, beautiful in its own way. I find her hand with mine and grasp it gently. "Maybe, if you want, we can face it together?" "Do you think they'll let us?" "There were others who went outside with each other, remember?" Annika's body relaxes into mine. The choice to live. I never thought I'd have to make it. I sigh and yawn as my eyelids fall closed. Me neither. "Good morning," my friend's voice says. Annika lies in the bed across the room. Sunlight filters through the ceiling of our home. It accents her smiling expression with pale greens. Her skin glitters with a metallic tone, but her eyes are still blue and human-looking, and her braid remains gray. In private, we speak with our natural vocal cords. They placed us near the sea in an area that used to be northwest France. The air reminds me of San Francisco, salt-tinged and fog-laden. We take our breakfast outside. The Chateau de Brest sits to our left, across the river, a concession to historical preservation. "I'd like to paint that," I say. "I suspected as much from the way you stare at it," Annika says. "I've been researching the chemistry. We can formulate oil and acrylic paints to match what you're used to." "After work today?" "It's a date." Our friendship develops new details each day. I know so little about her compared to my old relationships. I scan the list of day labor that I qualify for. With my minimal capabilities, my options are few. I choose neighborhood maintenance. It's the modern equivalent of gardening. To my surprise, Annika's name appears next to mine. Since we began our second life, she's chosen to stay indoors for work. "I think I'm ready," she says, anticipating my question. We bury our dishes in the decomposer and wash up. At the door, Annika hesitates, so I take her hand in mine. She nods. I take a deep breath. We step outside into our new world together. The end.
Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you, Divya.
Thank you.
Daniel, I don't know how we lucked into two such poignant stories today.
Just lucky, I guess.
Yeah, and they were both so visual, almost painterly at times. Reminds me of a reading when I sat next to an artist and she would close her eyes, sometimes for minutes at a time, and you could see her face reacting because she was envisioning the story in her head. And I tried that a few times tonight. It's pretty neat. So thank you both for giving us that. Next week is going to be our last story hour of 2020. We are going to have Dawn Vogel reading an actual holiday story and Daniel Marcus reading what will...
It might be kind of filthy, smutty story, but I haven't quite decided.
Well, there will be surprises. You can keep up to date about upcoming authors at storyhour2020.com. We're keeping that URL, although 2021 is coming soon and we'll still be here. And you can see programs you may have missed at the Story Hour page on Facebook. Greg, Divya, thank you both so much for being here tonight and sharing your stories with us.
Thank
you
you.
for having us.
Daniel, my co-host, founder of Story Hour, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And all of you, those of you who are here, those of you who are going to watch this later, thank you for joining us in Spinning the Fictive Dream.
Good night, everybody. Stay safe.
Good night.
Good night.